My name is Madison Carter, and at 29, I left my job as a registered nurse to care for my mother after she was diagnosed with stage 3 breast cancer. I gave up my apartment, paused my career, and put my social life on hold to move back home, while my sister Heather stayed in Seattle. I took on everything from managing medications to handling emergencies in the middle of the night. I believed my family would recognize and appreciate the sacrifice I was making. But after a full year of providing constant care, my parents handed me a bill for rent and utilities. Before I share how I reacted to this, let me know where you're watching from. And don't forget to like and subscribe to follow my story of standing up for myself against family who took advantage of my care. Before all of this happened, I had built a life I was proud of in Boston. After earning my nursing degree, I landed a job at Massachusetts General Hospital in the oncology department. I loved the work, despite its challenges, and I had recently been promoted to charge nurse. My apartment was small but comfortable, located in a lively neighborhood with cafes and parks nearby. Ryan, my boyfriend of 3 years, and I were even talking about moving in together. We had plans, dreams, and a future we were building. Then, everything changed with a single phone call. My father Warren's voice was shaky as he told me my mom had found a lump, and tests confirmed it was stage 3 breast cancer. While the prognosis wasn't terminal, the treatment would be harsh aggressive chemotherapy, radiation, possible surgery, and countless medical appointments. A family meeting was quickly set up. I flew back to my childhood home in Pennsylvania, expecting just a weekend to make plans. Heather joined via Zoom from Seattle, her 2 children occasionally appearing in the background. As we sat around the kitchen table that had seen so many family dinners, my father looked straight at me. "Madison, we need you," he said firmly. "Your mother needs you. You're the nurse in the family. You understand all this medical stuff." Heather immediately began listing reasons she couldn't relocate. Her job at a tech company was in a critical phase, her kids were settled in school, and her husband Jake's recent promotion meant more travel, not less. She just couldn't uproot everyone. My parents nodded in understanding at her excuses. No one mentioned that my career, apartment, and relationship were apparently less important. Heather offered financial help, as if money could replace her, physical presence, and promised daily phone calls for emotional support. All eyes turned to me. What could I say? This was my mother fighting cancer. I found myself agreeing to take family medical leave, just temporarily. Relief immediately washed over my parents' faces. Just like that, the decision was made. I was the solution. The next 2 weeks were a blur of arrangements. I negotiated a leave of absence from my job, hoping my position would still be there when I returned. Ryan and I had a tough conversation about long distance. He promised to visit when he could, but I saw worry in his eyes. My landlord agreed to end my lease early. Considering the situation, I packed my life into boxes, storing most of it in Ryan's garage. Locking my apartment door for the last time, I told myself this was only temporary, 6 months at most. Family comes first. The first few days back at my childhood home had a nostalgic feel. Mom was still relatively strong before treatments began. We cooked together, watched her favorite shows, and I organized her medical information into systems. Then chemotherapy started, and reality hit hard. My mother's body rejected the treatment meant to save her. Violent nausea, exhaustion, so intense she could barely sit up, and medication-related confusion were overwhelming. I had seen these symptoms in patients, but experiencing them with my own mother was entirely different. My nursing skills made me invaluable. I could translate complex medical terms, advocate for her during appointments, and manage medications precisely. But soon, my parents expected more than just medical expertise. One evening, my father casually asked if I could clean the kitchen and do the grocery shopping tasks my mother usually handled. Before long, I was responsible for cooking all meals, cleaning the entire house, running every errand, managing medications, providing physical care, and offering constant emotional support. I became nurse, housekeeper, cook, personal shopper, and therapist all in one. At first, my mother expressed gratitude. "What would we do without you, Maddie?" she'd say, using my childhood nickname. But as weeks passed and treatments worsened, her appreciation turned into expectation. My care became the new normal. Meanwhile, Heather's calls became infrequent and always came with excuses for postponing visits, back-to-back soccer tournaments. For the kids, rescheduled company retreats for Jake each time. She'd ask for a quick update, offer empty words of encouragement, and then steer the conversation toward her own struggles. Being a working mom is so exhausting. She once complained during a call when I was running on 3 hours of sleep after a night spent monitoring mom's fever. "The school wants more parent volunteers," she added. But when would I find the time? I bit my tongue, knowing any comparison of our situations would be seen as bitterness. 1 month stretched into 2, then 3, and my leave of absence from work was extended. Ryan's calls grew less frequent, and our conversations became strained. My savings dwindled, and what was meant to be temporary began to feel alarmingly permanent. By the third month, I had established a caregiving routine that would challenge even experienced medical professionals. My day started at 4 a.m. with my mom's first round of medications, which had to be given with specific foods at precise times. After helping her with morning hygiene, I prepared breakfast designed to reduce her nausea while providing the nutrition she needed. Mornings were filled with doctor appointments, requiring me to physically support my increasingly weak mother, helping her in and out of the car, navigating hospital parking, and taking detailed notes or home care sessions, involving physical therapy exercises I had researched and adapted for her condition. Afternoons involved another complex medication schedule, meal prep, cleaning, and laundry, which had to be done using fragrance-free detergent to avoid triggering her nausea. I also closely monitored her ever-changing symptoms. Evenings meant preparing dinner, administering more medications, assisting with bathing, and readying the house for night when sleep interruptions were expected. The physical toll on my body became impossible to ignore. I lost 15 pounds from my already slim frame, often skipping proper meals myself. Dark circles under my eyes became permanent, and a dull ache in my lower back from lifting mom in and out of bed turned into sharp pain I masked with over-the-counter painkillers. Yet the emotional and psychological impact was even heavier. I hadn't had a full night's sleep in months. My world had shrunk to the walls of my parents' home, with occasional trips to medical facilities. Friends stopped texting after I repeatedly declined invitations. My only regular contact outside family was with medical staff, and even then, I was seen as mom's daughter, not Madison. Financial anxiety became a constant companion. My savings, carefully built over years of hospital work, steadily diminished. Though I had health insurance through my job, the extended leave complicated matters. Every purchase, even essentials, came with worry and calculations. Meanwhile, my father Warren developed a habit of criticizing my caregiving. Despite his limited involvement, "Your mother prefers her pillows arranged differently," he'd say without offering to adjust them himself. "I think you're giving her too much water with those pills," he'd comment, though he couldn't name her medications. When I gently suggested he help with basic care tasks, his reply was predictable. "I'm keeping this household running. Someone has to work and pay the bills." My mother, who had always been stoic, grew more demanding as her condition stabilized and slowly improved. Genuine inability to perform tasks gave way to preference not to do them. "Madison can do it," became a refrain from both parents, said for everything from fetching a glass of water to researching complex medical questions late at night. Heather's involvement remained limited to occasional FaceTime calls, during which she expressed exaggerated sympathy for mom but barely acknowledged me. Yet somehow, these digital appearances earned her lavish praise. "Your sister called again today," mom said one evening warmly. "She's so attentive, always checking in. It means so much to have her emotional support through this." I looked up from organizing medications, my hands cracked from constant washing. "That's nice," I managed to say. The holidays were especially difficult. Heather and her family visited for 3 days, their first time in 6 months since mom's diagnosis. They arrived with presents and festive spirits and were treated like heroes. My parents beamed throughout their stay. "Isn't it wonderful having everyone together?" Mom said with more energy than I had seen in months. My father even cooked and cleaned without being asked. The contrast to their usual behavior was stark. On Christmas Eve, as I approached their bedroom with medication, I overheard a conversation. "Heather has been such a rock through all this," my father said. "The emotional support she provides Evan from across the country has made all the difference. I don't know what I'd do without her calls." Mom agreed. "She really understands what I'm going through in a way Madison can't seem to grasp. Madison's just doing what she's trained to do." I froze outside the door, the medication tray trembling in my hands. "Just doing what?" "She's trained to do," as if my sacrifice was merely professional duty rather than deep family love. That night, I cried silently in my childhood bedroom, feeling more alone than ever before. After the holidays, I finally confronted my father about the unfair distribution of responsibilities between Heather and me. "This isn't sustainable," I said, my voice shaking despite trying to stay calm. "I've put my entire life on hold. Heather hasn't sacrificed anything. I need more support or at least acknowledgement." His response cut deeply. "You live here rent-free. What more do you want? We're providing you room and board while you're between jobs. Many adults would be grateful for that safety net." My father's words hit like a blow, as if my leave of absence to care for my wife was simply unemployment, rather than a sacrifice made for family. The conversation ended unresolved, but something fundamental had changed. For the first time, I saw my caregiving role not as an act of love being inadequately appreciated, but as labor being exploited. 8 months into caregiving, my mother's health had improved significantly. Her cancer was responding well to treatment, her energy was rising, and her medical team was cautiously optimistic. Yet paradoxically, my role didn't less expanded. "Would you mind reorganizing the basement storage?" Mom asked one morning. "I've wanted to get to that for years. The gutters need cleaning before spring," Dad added casually at dinner. since you're here anyway. These weren't caregiving tasks. They were demands made because I was a full-time, unpaid household manager. While the medical need for my presence was decreasing, expectations for my service remained absolute. My once vibrant social life had vanished. Phone calls with the few friends who still reached out were rushed and interrupted by calls for help. Dating was non-existent. My world shrank to the four walls of my parents' house, with only occasional trips to medical appointments. One rare quiet afternoon, I cautiously brought up returning to work part-time. "I've been looking at some private duty nursing shifts," I said carefully. "Just 1 or 2 days a week. We could arrange for a home health aide those days." The response was immediate and unanimous. "That seems very premature." My father frowned. "Your mother still needs consistent care." "I wouldn't feel safe with a stranger," Mom added, even though she had done her own laundry that morning. "Nobody knows my needs like you do, Madison." The conversation was quickly redirected. My tentative step toward independence was, effectively, shut down. That same week Heather called with news. She was pregnant with her third child. My parents were thrilled and immediately planned a trip to Seattle. "Once the baby arrives, we'll need to stay for at least 2 weeks to help out," Mom declared, seemingly forgetting her recent insistence on constant care. "Heather will need support with 3 little ones." No one mentioned who would support me. After nearly a year of non-stop caregiving, no one suggested I might deserve a break or even accompany them. The cognitive dissonance was staggering. Then came an email from Ryan. After months of distant communication, he had met someone new. They were engaged. He was sorry and hoped I understood. He would always care for me. I sat on the back porch, staring at my phone until the screen went dark, feeling a deep sense of loss for a future that once seemed certain. That same day, I checked my professional email for the first time in weeks. I found a rejection letter for a nursing director, position I had applied to before my mother's diagnosis. The feedback was kind but clear. My extended absence raised concerns about my current clinical skills. My previously steady career path now seemed uncertain at best. The breaking point came later that week. Mom had a minor fall in the bath, serious, but enough to frighten her. Instead of concern, my father responded with blame. "Where were you?" he demanded, as I helped Mom to a chair. "You're supposed to be watching her." "I was making dinner," I replied, my voice flat with exhaustion. "Like you asked me to 20 minutes ago." "Well, priorities, Madison, safety first." The dinner could have waited. That night, after my parents were asleep, Heather called. I answered, hoping for some real connection. "God, I'm so exhausted," she began without warning. "The pregnancy nausea is awful, and Jake is traveling again. You have no idea how hard it is." Something inside me snapped. "Actually, Heather, I think I have some concept of difficulty," I said quietly. "Oh sure," she replied dismissively, "but you've always been the caretaker type. This comes naturally to you, and at least you don't have kids to worry about on top of everything." After hanging up, I locked myself in the bathroom and cried silently, muffling my sobs with a towel. For the first time, I seriously considered packing my car and driving away without explanation. The fantasy was shockingly tempting. Instead, I opened my laptop and began researching current rates for private duty nurses, home health aides, housekeeping, personal chef services, medical administration, transportation for appointments. The numbers were eye-opening. What I had provided out of love was worth a small fortune on the open market. My parents had received professional-level care without the respect or pay such work deserved. As I gathered this information, a resolution took shape. This situation would change one way or another. I would reclaim my life, my career, and my dignity. The only question was how to transition while ensuring Mom still received the care she needed. With new determination, I began drafting a detailed exit strategy, including alternative care options and associated costs. My service was valuable at this time. Everyone, including myself, recognized that. A full year had passed since I moved home to care for my mother. No one marked the anniversary, but me. I noted it quietly, thinking of the apartment I had given up and the life I had put on hold. The career I had placed on hold, the relationship that had ended, and the countless small sacrifices I had made had collectively transformed my life in ways I hadn't fully recognized until that point. Yet the most significant milestone came 2 days later, at one of Mom's oncology appointments. Dr. Brennan, her physician, reviewed the latest test results with a broad smile. "The cancer is in remission," she announced. "Your body has responded exceptionally well to treatment. Nancy, we'll continue with regular monitoring, but you're now cleared to resume normal activities with reasonable caution." My mother squeezed my hand, tears in her eyes. I felt a rush of relief mingled with an unexpected sense of anxiety. For the past year, my identity had been defined by caregiving. Now, medically speaking, that purpose had been fulfilled. That evening, I prepared a special dinner to celebrate Mom's recovery. As we ate, I took a breath and gathered the courage to address what felt like the unspoken reality in the room. "I've been thinking," I began gently, "now that Mom's doing better, it's time for me to start looking at apartments and nursing positions back in Boston. I can help transition in a part-time caregiver to handle anything that comes up." The sound of silverware on plates stopped. My parents exchanged a look across the table. Moving out already? Mom asked, surprised, as though the possibility hadn't occurred to her despite my having emphasized multiple times that this arrangement was temporary. I don't understand the rush, my father added, his brow furrowed. Your mother just got good news. Recovery is a process, not a moment. It's been a full year, I reminded them gently. I've extended my leave multiple times. If I don't get back to nursing soon, I risk falling behind professionally. I need to rebuild my life. I thought you were happy here, Mom said, her voice tinged with hurt. Being with family, taking care of things. I've been needed here, I replied, carefully. That's not the same as living a fulfilling life. And now that you're doing better, which is wonderful, it means the original reason for me being here has been resolved. An uncomfortable silence filled the space. Finally, my father cleared his throat. When exactly are you planning this move? I'd like to start looking immediately. Finding the right job and apartment could take a few weeks. I was hoping to be fully transitioned within 2 weeks, but I'm open to adjusting. My words hung heavily in the air. My mom's lips tightened into a thin line. My father's expression grew cold. 2 weeks, he repeated flatly. After everything we've done for you. I blinked, caught off guard. Everything you've done for me. We've given you a roof over your head, food, utilities, a place to stay when your job wasn't working out, he said, his version of events erasing the context of my sacrifice. Mom picked up where he left off. We thought you understood. This was a mutually beneficial arrangement. You needed a place to live. We needed help. Mutually beneficial, I echoed, finding my voice. I gave up my apartment, my job, my relationship, and my independence to provide medical care, cook, clean, and offer emotional support. And we gave you a place to stay, my father countered, as though the trade were equal. Just then, my phone chimed with an incoming call. Heather. Mom answered it on speaker, clearly hoping for reinforcement. Heather, dear, Madison just told us she's jumping ship now that my test results are good. 2 weeks notice? Like we're some kind of employer. She's leaving. Heather's voice rang with disbelief. But what will you do? Who's going to take care of everything? The assumption that everything still required management to Mom's medical clearance to resume daily activities was telling. I'm not abandoning anyone, I said firmly. Mom is in remission. She's been medically cleared. I fulfilled my role here. Now I need to focus on rebuilding my life. Wow, Heather replied. That feels really sudden. Kind of selfish, honestly. Family is supposed to be there for each other. I wish I could help out, but you know my situation. Yes, I knew her situation. It had been prioritized over mine for a year. I stood from the table, heart pounding. I think I need some air. As I headed for the door, my father called after me. This conversation isn't over. Madison, I know, I replied, not turning around. But I need a break right now. I walked through the neighborhood for nearly an hour, replaying the bizarre and painful conversation in my mind. My sacrifices had not only gone unrecognized, they had been reframed as if I had been the one receiving charity, not offering professional care for free. When I returned, the house was quiet. My parents had gone to bed. On the kitchen counter sat an envelope with my name on it. Inside was a handwritten invoice, room and board, $1,000 month. X 12 months equals $12,000. Utilities average $200 month X 12 months equals $2,400 internet cable, $100 month X 12 months equals $1,200 total due, $15,600. Sticky note was attached. We've been keeping track. Since you're treating this like a job with 2 weeks notice, we thought you should be aware of your outstanding financial obligations before you leave. Your sister contributed emotionally. I stood in the kitchen, staring at the note, my hands trembling not out of anger or sadness, but from the overwhelming realization that I had allowed myself to be undervalued for far too long. This was no longer just about caregiving, it was about reclaiming myself. The words on the invoice sat heavily between us, a stark mirror to the situation I'd been enduring for the past year. I couldn't help but marvel at the strange, almost surreal clarity that had overtaken me in the last few hours. It was as if I'd taken all the swirling chaos in my mind, distilled it down to hard, undeniable numbers. And now finally I could speak from a place of real balance. The kitchen was eerily quiet the next morning. I could feel the tension in the air as I prepared breakfast. Mom sat at the table, flipping through a magazine without really focusing on it. Dad, as usual, hid behind his newspaper. The envelope, containing their invoice, sat prominently on the counter, a silent reminder of the underlying assumption I owed them. I set the breakfast plates down without comment, then sat back at the table with my laptop. My fingers hovered for a moment over the keys as I took a steadying breath, gathering my resolve. I've been thinking about the bill you gave me, I began calmly, my voice steady despite the storm of emotion churning within. Dad lowered his newspaper slightly, eyeing me cautiously. It's only fair, Madison. Adults pay their way in this world. I completely agree, I replied, looking up from the screen. That's why I've prepared this. I slid a printed invoice across the table. His eyes narrowed. What's this supposed to be? An itemized invoice for the services I've provided over the past year, I said, my voice steady, even though my heart pounded. I think it's important. We have a full accounting if we're discussing financial obligations. Mom hesitated before pulling the document closer, her hands trembling as she read through the detailed breakdown. I had been meticulous. My invoice started with nursing care, 4,380 hours. Of skilled nursing services, 365 days, at 12 hours per day. At $45 hour equals $197,100. And that didn't even include the 24-hour monitoring. During critical phases of treatment, there were specialized services. Medication management, 365 days at $25 daily equals $9,125. Physical therapy assistance, 180 sessions at $50 each equals $9,000. Medical appointment, transportation, and advocacy, 86 appointments at $120 each equals $10,320. Symptom monitoring, 365 days at $25 daily equals $9,125. Then the household services, meal preparation, 1,095 meals at $15 each equals $16,425. Housekeeping, 52 weeks at $120 week equals $6,240. Laundry services, 156 loads at $25 each equals $3,900. Grocery shopping errands, 52 weeks at $75 week equals $3,900. And even the administrative work, insurance, paperwork, medical billing, 60 hours at $35 hour equals $2,100. Appointment scheduling, coordinating, 45 hours at $30 hour equals $1,350. Medication refill management, 26 instances at $25 each equals $650. Finally, I included emotional support, psychological support, and companionship, 365 days at $200 day equals $73,000. Family liaison services, 52 weeks at $100 week equals $5,200. The grand total, $296,760, subtracting their $15,600 for room and board. The amount due was $281,160. I watched as Mom's face strained of color, and Dad's jaw tightened, a muscle ticking in his cheek. "This is absurd," he whispered, but without conviction. "Is it?" I asked quietly, meeting his gaze. "Everything here is documented at market rates for equivalent professional services. If Mom had received this level of care from professionals, rather than family, this is what it would have cost, likely more." I saw my mother's tears begin to form as she shook her head. "We're your parents," she said softly. "You can't bill your parents for helping during a crisis." "And I'm your daughter," I replied, my voice barely breaking. "Yet you billed me for living here while I was helping. You valued Heather's occasional phone calls as meaningful contributions, but classified my physical presence and constant care as receiving charity." Dad stood up abruptly, pushing back from the table. "This is ridiculous. You can't compare professional services to family obligations." "Why not?" I challenged, my voice steady. "You compared my living here to a tenant arrangement, rather than a caregiving situation. You created the financial framework, not me," he faltered, running a hand through his hair. "It's not the same thing," he insisted, but there was no conviction behind his words. "The difference," I continued, "is that you valued the roof over my head at market rate, while you valued my skilled, professional care at zero." I paused. "I'm simply suggesting we be consistent in how we value things." Mom was openly crying now, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. "We never thought of it that way," she whispered. "We just assumed since you weren't working, double quotes. I was working," I corrected gently. "Every day, often through the night. The fact that I wasn't drawing a paycheck didn't change the fact that I was providing valuable skilled labor." I opened a supporting document, one I'd prepared for comparison. Hiring a live-in nurse, housekeeper, cook, and personal assistant would have cost approximately $330,000 annually. Home health agencies would charge similar amounts for equivalent coverage. I had provided all those services out of love, not obligation. Dad paced the kitchen, his face increasingly strained as he ran his hands through his hair. "This is emotional manipulation," he muttered weakly. "Is it manipulation to ask for my contribution to be valued?" I asked calmly, refusing to back down. The silence that followed was thick with uncomfortable realization. Finally, Dad slumped into a chair, looking defeated. Mom didn't say a word. I stayed where I was, watching them, knowing that the conversation we were having had reached a point of no return. This wasn't just about money. It was about the recognition of my worth, the recognition that had been absent for so long. And whether or not they understood it now, I was done pretending that my sacrifice didn't matter. I had given everything for them, and now it was time for me to reclaim my life. I could feel the gravity of the moment, the weight of years of unspoken resentment and buried truths finally coming to the surface. The house had been so full of tension and emotion for so long, and now finally it was as if the air was clearing. For the first time, they were seeing me. Really seeing me, and not just as a daughter, or a caretaker, but as a person with needs. A person who had been subsumed by this crisis for so long that it had nearly destroyed my own identity. I had asked Heather about the dollar value of her emotional support over the phone. The silence that followed was telling. Her attempt to justify her contribution, which had always been valued so highly despite being intangible, contrasted so sharply with my own real, physical, emotional, and medical labor that I felt almost liberated by the recognition. My family had always viewed me through a narrow lens, defined by my role as the caretaker, and now, for the first time, I had turned that lens back on them. I stayed quiet as I watched my parents process the invoice. I could see the panic in their eyes, but I also saw something else: recognition. My mother's voice was small, apologetic, as she finally acknowledged the enormity of what I had given up. "I never thought of it like this," she said, wiping her eyes. "The hours, when you write them all down like this, it's overwhelming." I wasn't surprised by her words. I had felt the same way in the midst of the whirlwind of caregiving. But to hear her say it, to acknowledge the depth of what I had done for them, was almost a balm to the wounds that had festered for so long. It was overwhelming to live them, I replied simply, feeling the sharp sting of everything I had sacrificed, everything that had been expected of me. We sat in silence for a long moment. Neither of us reached for the comforting lies or apologies that had become second nature in our family. There was nothing left to say in that moment, just the recognition of something that had been long overdue. Finally, I stood up and broke the stillness. "I'm going to pack some things," I said quietly. "I think we all need space to process." I retreated to my old room, the room I had once left to build a life of my own, now full of the physical remnants of the life I had put on hold. As I began sorting through my belongings, methodically separating what I needed from what could be left behind, there was an unexpected sense of catharsis in the act. For the first time in a long while, I felt in control of my own story, of my own life. An hour passed, and just as I was sorting through an old stack of photos, a knock came at the door. I opened it to find my father standing in the doorway, the crumpled invoice in his hand, his posture awkward and unsure. "Can we talk?" he asked, his voice lacking its usual confidence. I gestured for him to come in, and he sat heavily on the edge of the bed, looking around at the half-packed boxes that littered the room. "You're really leaving?" he asked, his voice quiet, almost disbelieving. "It wasn't a question," I said, meeting his eyes. "Yes, I need to restart my life." He nodded slowly, looking down at the invoice he was holding. "I tore this up," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Then I taped it back together. Then, I tore it up again. Then I decided I needed to keep it." I raised an eyebrow, curious. "Why?" "Because," he said, pausing as though to gather his thoughts, "it's the most honest thing anyone's shown me in years." My heart lurched at the rawness in his voice, at the vulnerability I had never expected to hear from him. He looked up at me, his eyes unexpectedly damp. When did I become the kind of father who would charge his daughter for helping during a family crisis? I felt a lump form in my throat at his question. It was so raw, so stripped of the pride and distance that had always characterized my relationship with him. I took a steadying breath and responded quietly, "I don't know. I don't recognize the parents who gave me that bill any more than you recognize the father who would write it." He rubbed his face with both hands, the lines of his face deepening. "With fatigue, your mother and I, we were terrified. The cancer diagnosis, the treatments, the uncertainty. I think we transferred all that fear into controlling whatever we could. And you, you were there. Always reliable, always capable. It became too easy to take that for granted. I understand fear," I said softly, "but using it as justification to exploit someone who loves you isn't acceptable." He nodded, his voice barely above a whisper. No, no, it isn't." Then, to my surprise, my mother appeared in the doorway, her face pale, showing signs of recent tears. Without waiting for an invitation, she entered the room and sat beside my father, the space between them tense, as though she too was navigating the wreckage of the past year. "I called Heather back," she said, her voice trembling. "I told her she needs to come visit in person to help figure out what happens next." The words were a revelation. My mother, always the one to excuse Heather's absence, was now insisting that she'll step up. It was unprecedented, my mother asking her daughter to take responsibility, to contribute more, rather than defaulting to the usual excuses. "Madison," she continued, her voice unsteady, "I owe you an apology. We both do. Seeing everything written down like that, I had no idea how much you were actually doing, how much you gave up. I think I didn't want to know, because then I'd have to face how much I was taking." For the first time in months, I saw my mother really saw her, not as a patient, not as a demanding parent, but as a flawed, frightened human being who had almost lost her life and whose trauma I had never fully processed. I took a slow breath and said, "The bill wasn't about money. It was about recognition, seeing my contribution as valuable, rather than expected." My father, still holding the invoice, nodded, but the acknowledgement felt like a hollow gesture, like he knew the truth, but was too late to fix what had been broken. "We know that now," he said, quietly. "Too late, probably, but we know." And so we sat together, the three of us finally engaging in the most honest conversation we'd had as a family in years. They shared their terror at the diagnosis, the helplessness they felt in the face of the unknown. My mother talked about her fear of burdening me, her guilt at asking so much of me. And I really listened for the first time in a long while. For the first time in a year, I didn't feel like I was invisible. I didn't feel like my role was just to serve, to give, to silently endure. I was finally being seen not as an obligation, but as a person whose sacrifices mattered. That alone didn't fix everything, but it was a start. And for the first time in a long while, I had hope. Hope that one day, I could rebuild the life I had lost, and that, perhaps, I could rebuild my relationship with my parents too. Commitments: visiting every other month, handling appointment, scheduling, even flying out solo when Dad had a minor health scare. She was far from perfect, but the effort was real, and maybe that was enough. Maybe we were finally learning that love isn't measured by flawless behavior, but by the willingness to try again after falling short. On one particular Sunday, as we sat around the dining room table, eating the lemon tart I had brought, my mother reached across the table and touched my hand. "I never thought I'd say this," she said, "but I think getting sick saved our family." It wasn't a clean sentiment. It didn't erase the bitterness or erase the sacrifices, but it acknowledged something I had longed to hear, that the pain had not been pointless. I looked at her, then at my father and Heather, and nodded. "It broke us," I said softly, "but we chose to rebuild, not in the image of what we used to be, those polished holiday snapshots, the illusion of a harmonious family, but something far more honest, messier, yes, but stronger, too, because this time we weren't pretending. We weren't hiding behind obligation or outdated roles. We were showing up, flawed and frightened, but present. And presence, I had learned, was the most profound form of love. As I drove back to Boston that night, the city skyline welcoming me home, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known in years. Not because everything was perfect, it wasn't, but because, for the first time, I was no longer disappearing inside the needs of others. I had stepped back into my own life, not as a nurse, not as a caregiver, not as the default solution to other people's problems, but as Madison, whole, wiser, and finally, free. Heather followed through on her promises, visiting our parents each month. Sometimes she brought the kids, but often left them with her husband so she and Mom could spend sister weekends together. She and I began speaking weekly, our conversations gradually shifting from casual updates to more meaningful discussions. "I never realized how much I depended on you being the responsible one," she admitted in one call. "It was so easy to play the fun, carefree daughter when you were managing everything. And it was easier for me to resent you than to set boundaries," I responded. We had both been playing roles shaped long ago. Therapy became a key part of my recovery. My therapist, Dr. Winters, specialized in caregiver burnout and family dynamics. Our sessions helped me process not just the emotional weight of the caregiving year, but the deeper patterns that made that year possible in the first place. "You didn't become a nurse by accident," she pointed out once. "Caregiving has shaped your identity since you were a child. The real question is, who is Madison when she's not taking care of everyone else?" That question stayed with me. Each day I gave myself space to explore my own likes, limits, and goals, things I had often ignored in order to meet others' needs. One Tuesday evening, I received a package from my mother. Inside was a small wooden box from her dresser and a handwritten letter. "Dear Madison, this necklace belonged to your grandmother. She gave it to me when I graduated from nursing school, before I became a teacher. I always meant to pass it down to you when the time felt right. But somehow, I never found the moment. I realize now that I never truly acknowledged something important. You were a caregiver long before you became a nurse. Your compassion and strength have always been your greatest qualities. What happened last year was unfair. We leaned on your skills and generosity without offering the respect or appreciation you deserved. No gift can undo that. But I hope you'll accept this as a small symbol of my admiration for the woman you've become, not because of us, but in spite of us. I'm working on being the mother you deserve, even if it's taken me too long to see it. With love and deep gratitude, Mom." Holding the delicate silver pendant in my hand, tears welled in my eyes. The gift meant more than just jewelry. It was a sign of recognition, of finally being seen not just for what I did, but for who I was. That weekend, during our usual family dinner, my father handed me a pamphlet. "I thought you might be interested," he said, hesitantly. It was information about a caregiver advocacy group pushing for legislation to support unpaid family caregivers, things like tax credits and Social Security compensation. "That actually sounds really important," I said, surprised and touched. "I made a donation in your name," he added. "Not to pressure you to get involved, just to show support." These small acts of understanding brought a sense of healing I hadn't expected. While past wounds weren't magically gone, healthier patterns were starting to take their place. In May, I met Daniel at a hospital fundraiser. He was a physical therapist who had cared for his father after a stroke. That shared experience built an immediate connection. "It changes you," he said, on our first date. "People can sympathize, but they don't truly get it the way caregiving takes over your identity and how hard it is to reclaim yourself afterward." "I do," I replied. "It's like rebuilding from the inside out." Our relationship grew slowly. We were both cautious about giving up the independence we had only recently regained, but Daniel's respect for my space and understanding of my past made the relationship feel refreshingly sincere. As spring turned into summer, I thought often about what the past year and a half had taught me. I had learned that setting boundaries is not selfish, it's necessary. That love without respect can quickly turn into exploitation, no matter the intent. That old family patterns are hard to break, but not impossible. Most of all, I had learned that my worth didn't depend on what I could give to others. My care had value: emotional, practical, and yes, financial even if others failed to see it. One evening, I sat on my balcony, watching the Boston skyline glow in the fading lights. For the first time in years, I felt truly at peace. The path to this moment had been painful. The conversations were tough, the rebuilding slow, but I had come away with something vital: the understanding that I could care deeply for others without losing myself in the process. I still had mixed feelings about that year: pride in what I did, frustration at how it was received, sadness for what it cost. But increasingly, I also felt gratitude. Without that year, we might never have confronted the unhealthy dynamics that had defined our family for so long. Sometimes, healing requires something to break first. Sometimes, the most compassionate thing we can do is draw a firm boundary. And sometimes, the most loving choice is to stand tall in your own worth even if the people who should see it don't. At first, that as I prepare to share more about this journey, I wonder, what has your experience with family caregiving and boundaries been like? Have you ever had to fight to have your value recognized? How do you balance care with self-respect when the two seem to conflict?